Jake Morrison sat in front of his computer screen. His eyes felt tired. He had been watching the same green lines and numbers for 6 hours straight. The small room around him was quiet except for the soft hum of machines. Outside the window, stars filled the black space. Earth was far below, a blue and white ball spinning slowly. Jake worked at Sentinel-7, a listening station that floated in orbit around Earth. His job was simple but boring. He listened to radio signals from deep space. Most days he heard nothing interesting, just the natural sounds of stars and gas clouds, sometimes a satellite beacon, nothing more. He was 28 years old. 3 years ago, he had volunteered for this job. Back then, it seemed exciting. Living in space, watching for alien signals, being the first to make contact with another civilization. But after 3 years of hearing nothing, the excitement had faded. Now it was just a job. Jake reached for his coffee cup. It was empty. He sighed and stood up to get more. That was when the computer made a sound. It was a soft beep, but in the quiet room it seemed loud. Jake froze. He turned back to his screen. The green lines were moving differently now. They jumped and spiked in patterns he had never seen before. His heart started beating faster. Jake sat down quickly and put on his headphones. Through the speakers he heard something that made his hands shake. It was not the random noise of space. It was organized. Musical almost. The signal repeated over and over in a clear pattern. Numbers. Mathematical sequences. Prime numbers arranged in groups. This was not natural. This was artificial. This was intelligent. Jake pressed the emergency button on his desk. A red light started flashing on the wall. Within seconds, the door opened. Commander Helen Parker rushed inside. She was 40 years old with short gray hair and sharp eyes. She had been running the station for 5 years. "What is it, Jake?" she asked. Her voice was calm, but her eyes showed concern. Jake pointed at his screen. "Listen," he said, switching the signal to the room speakers. The sound filled the small room. Helen stood very still. Her face went pale. She knew what this meant. After 30 years of listening to space, humanity had finally heard something back. "How long has it been transmitting?" Helen asked. Jake checked his computer. "Just started 2 minutes ago. The signal is coming from outside our solar system. Distance is about 40 light years. The pattern keeps repeating." Helen moved to another computer and started typing fast. "We need to decode this immediately. Wake up the quantum processors. Get every available system working on this. I am calling Earth Command." For the next 3 hours, Jake and Helen worked without stopping. The quantum computers analyzed the signal. Slowly, patterns emerged. The signal was not just numbers. It contained information, pictures, sounds. And underneath it all, something that made both of them go quiet. Emotion, desperation. The translation came through piece by piece. The computers had to learn an entirely new language. But mathematics was universal. Using math as a foundation, the systems built a basic understanding. The message said, "We are the Valari. Our home is under attack. We are dying. We cannot fight. We need help. Please, anyone, help us." The message repeated over and over. Each time it included coordinates. A star system 40 light years from Earth. A place humanity had never visited. The Valari were broadcasting on every frequency they could, hoping someone would hear them. Helen sent everything to Earth Command. Within an hour, video calls started coming in. Scientists, military officers, government officials. Everyone wanted to see the signal. Everyone had questions. Jake sat back in his chair. His coffee was cold and forgotten. Outside the window, Earth continued turning. Down there, billions of people had no idea what had just happened. First contact, but not the way anyone had imagined. Not a friendly greeting. A cry for help. The next day, Jake was called to a meeting. He traveled down to Earth on a shuttle. The meeting was held in Geneva, at Earth Command headquarters. The building was huge and made of glass and steel. Inside, the halls were filled with people in military uniforms rushing between rooms. Jake had never been to headquarters before. He felt small and out of place. A young officer led him to a conference room on the top floor. Inside, 20 people sat around a long table. At the head of the table sat Admiral Gregory Kane. Admiral Kane was 60 years old. His hair was white and his face showed deep lines from years of responsibility. He had been in charge of Earth's space military for 10 years. People respected him. He was known for making hard decisions quickly. "Lieutenant Morrison," the Admiral said, nodding at Jake. "Good work detecting that signal. Please sit down." Jake sat in an empty chair. Around the table, he recognized some faces from news broadcasts. Scientists he had studied in school, military leaders he had only seen in videos. All of them were looking at screens showing data about the Volari signal. A woman with dark hair stood up. She was Dr. Lisa Chen, a famous scientist who studied alien life. "We have learned more about the Volari in the past 24 hours, she said. Her voice filled the quiet room. "They are real. They are biological creatures like us, and they are in serious danger." Dr. Chen pressed a button and images appeared on the wall screens. The Volari looked nothing like humans. They were small, about 4 feet tall. Their skin was smooth and changed colors like a rainbow. They had large eyes and thin arms. They looked delicate, fragile. "The Volari come from a planet with low gravity," Dr. Chen continued. "Their world is peaceful, warm temperatures, no large predators. They evolved as herbivores, plant eaters. They have technology, they have art and culture, but they have no weapons. They never needed them." Another screen showed different aliens. These looked terrifying. They were tall, maybe 7 feet. They had armor like shells covering their bodies, sharp claws, teeth designed for ripping meat. Their eyes were small and cold. "These are the Krell," Dr. Chen said quietly. "They are attacking the Volari. The Krell come from a high-gravity planet. They evolved as apex predators, the top hunters on their world. Now they use that strength to conquer other species. They have destroyed 3 civilizations in the past 20 years. The room was silent. Jake felt sick looking at the images of Krell warships. They were huge and covered in weapons. Next to them, the few Volari ships looked like toys. Admiral Kane stood up. He looked around the table at each person. "The question before us is simple," he said. "Do we respond to this distress call? Do we help the Volari? Or do we stay silent and safe?" Arguments started immediately. Some people said it was too dangerous. Humanity had only developed faster than light travel 5 years ago. Earth's military was small, only 50 warships total. The Krell had hundreds, maybe thousands. Other people said humanity had a moral duty to help. If someone cries for help, you answer. That is what makes us human. That is what makes us good. We cannot ignore people dying just because they are far away and look different. The argument went on for hours. Jake listened to all of it. He thought about the Volari message, the desperation in those mathematical patterns, a whole civilization crying out into the dark, hoping someone would care enough to help. Finally, Admiral Kane raised his hand. The room went quiet. He looked tired but determined. "We are going," he said. His voice was firm. "We will send a fleet to help the Volari. Not because it is easy, not because it is safe, but because it is right. Humanity will not ignore a distress call. We will show the galaxy what we stand for." Some people at the table looked relieved. Others looked worried. But no one argued. The decision was made. Admiral Kane looked directly at Jake. "Lieutenant Morrison, you will be assigned to the flagship. You heard their call first. You should be there when we answer it." Jake felt his heart race. He nodded. "Yes, sir," he said. The meeting ended. People rushed out to start preparations. Jake walked to a window and looked up at the sky. Somewhere out there, 40 light-years away, people were dying, and now humanity was coming to help. The age of isolation was over. Earth was stepping into the galaxy. The call went out across all of Earth's military bases. Every ship, every soldier, every pilot. Within 48 hours, the response was massive. People volunteered faster than the military could process them. Young men and women lined up at recruitment centers. They wanted to be part of history. They wanted to help. Captain Nicole Grant received her orders while she was eating breakfast on the space station near Mars. She was 35 years old and had been commanding starships for 8 years. She had led missions through asteroid fields and to the outer planets. She was known for staying calm when things went wrong. The message on her tablet was short. "Report to Jupiter Station immediately. You will command the flagship Valiant. Prepare for extended combat operations." Nicole put down her coffee. Her hands were steady, but her mind was racing. Combat operations. She had trained for battle but never experienced it. No human had. This would be the first time humanity fought in space against another species. She packed quickly and took a shuttle to Jupiter. The journey took 2 days. When she arrived, she could not believe what she saw. The orbital space around Jupiter was filled with ships. Military vessels of every size, cruisers, frigates, destroyers, support ships, medical vessels, transport carriers. It was the largest fleet humanity had ever assembled. The Valiant was beautiful. She was 800 feet long with thick armor plating and powerful engines. Weapons covered her hull. Missile tubes, laser cannons, and something new called railguns. These could fire solid metal projectiles at incredible speeds, fast enough to punch through almost anything. Nicole walked onto the bridge for the first time. The room was large with screens covering every wall. Crew members sat at their stations, checking systems and running tests. They all stood when she entered. At ease, Nicole said. She moved to the captain's chair in the center of the room. Status report, a young man stepped forward. He was Lieutenant Commander Ryan Bell, the tactical officer. All systems are ready, Captain. Weapons are loaded. Shields are at full power. The crew is eager to begin. Nicole nodded. Good. She looked around at her crew. Most of them were young. In their 20s. They had trained hard but never seen real danger. She hoped they were ready. Over the next day, Nicole met with other ship commanders. Captain Paul Griffin commanded the heavy cruiser Liberty. He was 40 years old with a reputation for aggressive tactics. Captain Rachel Stone led the cruiser Defiance. She was quiet but brilliant at strategy. Commander Alex Torres was in charge of 12 frigates. These smaller ships were fast and deadly. Torres was only 30, but had more flight hours than anyone in the fleet. His ships would be crucial for hit-and-run attacks. The Marines were led by Colonel Steve Price. He was a big man with a scarred face and a loud voice. His 3,000 Marines were the best fighters Earth had. They trained constantly in zero-gravity combat. If boarding enemy ships became necessary, they would lead the way. On the second day, Dr. Lisa Chen gave a presentation to all the commanders. She stood in front of a large screen showing images and data. Her voice was clear and confident. You need to understand what makes humans different, she began. Earth is classified as a death world. Do you know what that means? Most planets that support life are gentle places. Low gravity, stable temperatures, few predators. Life evolves slowly in safe conditions. But Earth is different. Earth is dangerous. She showed images of Earth's surface. Hurricanes, tornadoes, volcanoes, earthquakes, floods, ice ages. The planet has tried to kill life for billions of years, and life on Earth responded by becoming stronger. Earth's gravity is higher than most life-bearing worlds, Dr. Chen continued. Our atmosphere has lots of oxygen. Oxygen is actually toxic in high amounts. It causes metal to rust and organic materials to decay. We live in a corrosive environment and do not even notice. She pulled up data comparing humans to other species. Humans can run for hours without stopping. Most alien species tire after minutes. Humans can survive extreme temperatures that would kill others. Humans heal from injuries that would be fatal to beings from gentler worlds. Your bodies are weapons, Dr. Chen said. Your bones are dense and strong. Your muscles are powerful. Your immune systems are aggressive. You can eat foods that would poison most aliens. You can survive in conditions that would kill them. The room was silent. Nicole looked at her hands. She had never thought of herself as particularly strong, but compared to aliens from peaceful worlds, humans were monsters. The Krell are also from a death world, Dr. Chen added, but theirs is less extreme than Earth. They are strong and tough. But you are stronger. You are tougher. Use that advantage. After the presentation, Nicole walked through the ship. She stopped to talk with crew members. Engineers were checking the engines. Medical staff were preparing the sickbay. Weapons officers were loading missiles and railgun ammunition. Lieutenant Sophie Martinez ran the engineering department. She was 28 and brilliant with machines. She showed Nicole the railgun systems with obvious pride. These beauties can fire a tungsten rod at 15,000 miles per second, Sophie explained. At that speed, the projectile has more energy than a small nuclear bomb. Nothing can stop it, Nicole was impressed. Will they work against Krell shields? Sophie grinned. Shields are designed to deflect energy weapons, lasers and such, but a solid chunk of metal moving at relativistic speed, that just punches right through. Physics does not care about force fields. On the third day, a small alien ship arrived at Jupiter Station. Everyone stopped what they were doing to watch. This was it. First contact. Real aliens coming to meet humans. The Volari shuttle docked carefully. Armed guards stood ready, but they were not needed. When the airlock opened, a small figure stepped through. The Valari was even smaller than the pictures suggested, maybe 3.5 feet tall. Its skin rippled with colors, blues and greens and purples flowing like water. Its eyes were huge and dark. It wore simple robes that seemed to be made from plant fibers. Through a translation device, the alien spoke. Its voice was soft and musical. "I am called Keeper of Songs. I represent my people. I come with gratitude and hope." Admiral Kane greeted the ambassador formally. Nicole stood nearby watching carefully. The Valari looked fragile, like it might break if someone touched it too hard. The idea of these gentle beings facing the Krell made her angry. Keeper of Songs provided more information about the attack. The Krell had come without warning. Valari ships tried to defend but were destroyed easily. The Krell weapons were too powerful. Their ships were too strong. Within days, the Valari homeworld was surrounded. Now millions of Valari were trapped on their planet. Food was running low. Medical supplies were gone. People were dying. The Krell wanted complete surrender and slavery. They would take everything the Valari had built over thousands of years. "We sent distress signals to every star system we could reach," Keeper of Songs said. Its colors shifted to dark blues and grays, showing sadness. No one answered. "We thought we would die alone, unknown, forgotten, but then you heard us. You came. Why?" Admiral Kane looked at the small alien. "Because it is the right thing to do. Because if we can help and choose not to, we are no better than the Krell. Because humanity believes that all intelligent life has value." Keeper of Songs' colors shifted to bright golds and yellows, hope, gratitude. The translation device struggled to convey the depth of emotion. "Can you truly face the Krell?" the ambassador asked quietly. "They are powerful. They have conquered 3 civilizations. They have hundreds of ships. They enjoy killing. Can you stop them?" Nicole stepped forward. "We will try our best. We are from a death world. We evolve fighting to survive. The Krell may be strong, but so are we. And we have something they do not." "What is that?" Keeper of Songs asked. Nicole smiled. "A reason to fight. The Krell fight for conquest. We fight for you, for your people, for what is right. That makes us more dangerous than they can imagine." The next day, the fleet prepared to depart. 23 ships, 5,000 crew members, 3,000 Marines, all ready to jump into the unknown. Nicole sat in her captain's chair and gave the order. "All ships, prepare for faster than light jump. Destination Vellery system. Let us go answer that distress call." The sun rose over Vareth Prime, and for the first time in 3 days its light fell on a world that wasn't being destroyed. The bombardment had stopped. The fires were slowly being put out. The Varanthi emerged from their shelters like cautious animals, hardly believing they were still alive. Council Leader Threen stood outside the bunker and looked at his wounded world. Beautiful buildings lay in ruins. The crystalline gardens that had taken centuries to grow were shattered. The air smelled of smoke and death. But they had survived. Against all odds, they had survived. Council Leader, Vess approached him, her skin colors muted with exhaustion. "The humans are requesting permission to send people down to meet with us. They want to talk." Threen felt a flutter of new fear. They knew almost nothing about these humans except that they were terrifyingly good at violence. What if they had just traded one conqueror for another? What if the humans wanted payment for their help? Payment the Varanthi couldn't possibly afford? "What choice do we have?" Threen asked quietly. "They saved us. The least we can do is talk to them. Tell them they may come to the council chambers." Lieutenant Commander Sophie Grant had been looking forward to this moment her whole career. First contact with a new species was always exciting, even under terrible circumstances. She checked her uniform one more time, made sure her translator was working properly, and stepped out of the shuttle onto Varanthi soil. The air was sweet, almost like flowers with more oxygen than Earth normal. Sophie took a deep breath and smiled. Around her, the landscape was both beautiful and heartbreaking. She could see what this world had been before the attack, and what it had become. The Varanthi delegation approached slowly. Sophie had studied everything humanity knew about them during the flight down, which wasn't much. They were tall and slender with 6 eyes and skin that changed colors based on their emotions. Right now, their skin showed patterns that the computer said meant fear mixed with hope. Sophie walked forward with her best diplomatic smile. "Greetings. I'm Lieutenant Commander Sophie Grant of the United Human Systems. On behalf of Captain Morrison and all our people, I want you to know that you're safe now. The Krell won't be coming back. Threen studied the human carefully. She was so strange-looking with only 2 eyes and skin that stayed the same color. Her body looked almost fragile. Yet this fragile-looking creature belonged to a species that had destroyed 40 warships in minutes. You came to our distress call, Threen said, his voice translating into awkward human words. But that call was meant for the old Union. How did you receive it? Sophie's smile turned sheepish. Honestly, we think your beacon's routing system was corrupted. The signal found us by mistake. The Varanthi all changed colors at once, flashing to shocked purple. Vess spoke up, her voice high with disbelief. By mistake? You risked your lives and fought a war by mistake? Well, Sophie said carefully. Once we knew you were in trouble, it stopped being a mistake. Where I come from, you don't ignore a distress call just because it wasn't meant for you. If someone needs help, you help them. The Varanthi exchanged glances, colors rippling in ways Sophie's translator couldn't quite interpret. They seemed confused by something. Threen spoke slowly, choosing his words with care. We must ask this question. What price do you want for your help? The Krell wanted our minerals. What do the humans want? Sophie looked genuinely puzzled. Price, we don't want anything. You were being attacked, so we helped. That's all there is to it. That's not how the galaxy works, Vess said, her voice sharp. No species sends a military fleet without expecting something in return. What do you really want? Sophie was quiet for a moment, realizing she was dealing with a huge cultural difference. Look, maybe we can talk about formal relationships later if you want. Trade agreements, cultural exchanges, whatever makes sense for both of us. But the military help? That's not for sale. We helped because people were in trouble. That's what decent people do. Threen felt something shift in his understanding of the universe. Where do you come from, Sophie Grant? What kind of world creates people like you? Sophie pulled out a small device and projected a hologram of Earth into the air between them. The blue and green planet rotated slowly, looking peaceful and beautiful. This is our home world, Sophie said. We call it Earth. It's what galactic science classifies as a Class 12 death world. Every Varanthi in the group immediately shifted to the same color of pure horror. A death world? Threen whispered. That's impossible. Death worlds are planets where everything tries to kill you. Nothing civilized can evolve on a death world. How did you survive? Sophie grinned. We're tough. Would you like to see what Earth is really like? Over the next hour, Sophie showed them Earth in all its terrible glory. She showed them oceans so deep they could swallow mountains, with water pressure that would crush most species instantly. She showed them storms that could level entire cities, hurricanes with winds that moved faster than most species could fly. She showed them deserts where the heat would cook you alive in minutes, frozen wastelands where the cold would kill you in seconds, jungles filled with plants that were poisonous and animals that were deadly, earthquakes that could reshape continents, volcanoes that could change the global climate. And then she showed them the predators, great cats that could hunt in perfect silence, sharks that had survived unchanged for millions of years because they were already perfect killing machines, bears strong enough to break trees, crocodiles that could drag prey 3 times their size underwater. The Varanthi watched in growing horror. And you evolved alongside these creatures? Vess asked, her voice barely a whisper. We didn't just evolve alongside them, Sophie said. We competed with them. We hunted them. We survived them. And eventually we won. Sophie showed them more. Humans running marathons across deserts that would kill most species in minutes. Not because they had to, but for fun. Humans swimming in waters cold enough to freeze blood, calling it recreation. Humans climbing mountains where the air was too thin to breathe properly, just to see the view from the top. Your people do these things for enjoyment? Threen asked, his colors cycling through confusion and awe. You challenge your own world willingly? Sophie nodded. On Earth, you learn pretty quickly that the universe doesn't care if you're comfortable. Nature doesn't care if you're scared. So you either get tough or you die. We chose to get tough. That's why you're so good at fighting, Vess said, understanding dawning. You had to be. Your whole evolution was warfare against your own planet. I guess you could say that, Sophie agreed. But Earth didn't just make us strong. It taught us to work together. The humans who couldn't cooperate, who couldn't help each other, they didn't survive. We learned that survival means standing together. Threen looked at Sophie with new understanding. The humans weren't just strong or violent. They were survivors who had been forced to become warriors. They had learned that strength should be used to protect, not because someone taught them, but because it was the only way to survive on their nightmare world. "We cannot repay this debt," Threen said quietly. "We have nothing that could equal what you've done for us." Sophie's smile was warm and genuine. "Then don't think of it as a debt. Think of it as what neighbors do for each other. You know what? I bet Earth made us tough, but it didn't make us wise. Maybe you can teach us something about peace, about building beautiful things instead of destroying them. We could learn a lot from you." For the first time since the Krell had arrived, Threen's colors shifted to something like joy. These strange humans from their nightmare world had come to help, and maybe, just maybe, they had found friends in the darkness of space. "Then let us learn from each other," Threen said, "and perhaps together we can make the galaxy a better place." Sophie extended her hand, a human gesture of friendship. Threen carefully reached out and touched it with his own longer, more delicate fingers. Two species from completely different worlds, making contact for the first time. Above them, the human fleet continued its patrol, standing guard over a world they had saved. Standing guard because someone had called for help, even if by mistake. Standing guard because that's what humans did. 3 days after the battle, the world was still trying to process what had happened. Every news channel showed the same footage. Human warships fighting alien invaders. Victory against impossible odds. Earth had survived, but nothing would ever be the same. President Janet Cooper stood in the United Nations building, addressing representatives from every nation on Earth. She looked tired. The past 72 hours had been the most stressful of her life, but her voice was steady as she spoke about humanity's future among the stars. The Corvani would return to their empire and tell everyone what happened. Other alien civilizations would hear about Earth. Some would see humans as potential allies. Others would see them as threats. Earth needed to be ready for both possibilities. Admiral Walsh sat beside her, waiting to answer military questions. He'd been promoted again, given command of all Earth defense forces. His first recommendation was simple: build more ships, 50 at least, maybe 100. The Corvani had been one threat. There would be others, but ships took time to build. Years of construction, testing, training, and they were expensive. Every nation would have to contribute. Money, resources, people. The entire planet would need to work together in ways they never had before. Jake Morrison was offered a promotion too. They wanted to make him an admiral, put him in charge of the new fleet construction. He turned it down. He was a ship captain, not a desk officer. He belonged on a bridge, not in a conference room. They let him keep the Defiant and gave him the mission he wanted. Patrol duty, watching for threats, protecting Earth. Amy Carter did accept her promotion. Lieutenant commander now with her own ship. A smaller vessel than the Defiant, designed for scouting and reconnaissance. Her job was to explore nearby star systems, look for potential colonies, and watch for danger. She was excited and terrified in equal measure. On the other side of the galaxy, the surviving Corvani ships arrived at their home system. Vectar's report was transmitted immediately to the Empire's ruling council. They read it in silence, unable to believe what they were seeing. 230 ships destroyed. By 9 human vessels, impossible, but the evidence was clear. Sensor logs, video recordings, testimony from hundreds of survivors. The humans had weapons unlike anything the Empire had encountered. Kinetic weapons that ignored shields, point defense systems that could destroy entire fighter wings. And most terrifying of all, they had the tactical knowledge to use those weapons perfectly. The council debated for 3 days. Some wanted revenge. Others wanted to study human technology, learn from it. A few wise members suggested leaving Earth alone entirely. Humanity had proven itself dangerous. Why provoke them further? But empires don't stay empires by backing down. The council made a decision. No direct attacks on Earth, not yet, but they would watch. Study. Learn everything they could about human strengths and weaknesses. And when they were ready, when they understood how humans fought, then they would strike again. Vectar heard the decision and knew it was a mistake. The council didn't understand. They thought this was about technology, about weapons and tactics, but it wasn't. It was about psychology, about a species that had spent 10,000 years fighting itself and learning from every conflict. The Corvani had conquered 47 worlds, but those were peaceful species, civilizations that had given up warfare before reaching the stars. They'd been easy targets. Humanity was different. Humans had reached the stars while still fighting each other. They'd brought their violence with them. Vector requested permission to retire from military service. He'd lost too many soldiers, seen too many ships destroyed. He didn't want to be part of whatever came next. The council granted his request, happy to be rid of a commander who spoke too much about human strength. Back on Earth, Captain Helen Price was preparing for humanity's first diplomatic mission. She was a linguist trained in communication and negotiation. Her job was to make first contact with other alien species, not the Corvani. They'd already made their position clear. But there were others out there. Peaceful civilizations that might welcome human friendship. Helen studied everything humans knew about alien cultures. The information was limited. Most of it came from intercepted Corvani communications. But it was enough to start building profiles, understanding how different species thought, what they valued, how to approach them without causing fear or offense. Her ship would be the USS Guardian, not a warship like the Defiant, a diplomatic vessel, designed for long voyages and comfortable accommodations, but it still carried weapons. Every human ship did now. They'd learned that lesson the hard way. Hope for peace but prepare for war. Captain Dan Rogers would command the Guardian's escort. 3 smaller warships would accompany Helen on her missions. Their job was simple: protect the diplomats, show that humans could be peaceful, but also show that humans could defend themselves if necessary. Dan had been in the military for 20 years. He'd served on submarines, then spacecraft, working his way up through the ranks. He understood the balance Helen needed. Be friendly but not weak. Show strength but not aggression. It was a delicate line to walk. The first diplomatic mission would launch in 6 months. That gave Helen time to prepare, to study, to practice her approach. Dan used that time to train his crews. They would be representing humanity to the galaxy. Everything they did would shape how aliens viewed Earth. Meanwhile, across the solar system, construction continued. New shipyards orbited Mars and the Moon. Asteroid mining operations expanded to provide raw materials. Factories ran 24 hours a day, building components for the new fleet. Humanity was mobilizing for a future among the stars. Lieutenant Sarah Blake worked at one of the new medical facilities on Mars. Her job was treating injured personnel from the battle. Most wounds were minor: radiation exposure, broken bones from hard maneuvers, psychological stress. But some were serious. People who'd been exposed to vacuum when their sections were damaged, burns from energy weapons that got through the armor. She also treated Corvani survivors. 3 ships had been captured intact when their crews surrendered. The aliens were held as prisoners of war, given medical care and decent accommodations. Studying them helped humanity understand alien biology, how they thought, how they communicated, what they needed to survive. The Corvani prisoners were confused by their treatment. In their empire, prisoners were slaves or test subjects. But humans gave them food, shelter, medical care, even respect. It didn't match what they'd been taught about primitive species. Maybe their empire had been wrong about more than just human military capability. One prisoner, a junior officer named Krell, started talking to Sarah, learning English, sharing information about the empire, not because he was being forced, but because he wanted to understand. How had humans become so strong? How did they balance violence and mercy? Sarah tried to explain. Humans fought each other for thousands of years. They learned war's cost, the pain it caused. But they also learned war's necessity. Sometimes you had to fight to survive. The trick was knowing when to fight and when to show mercy, when to be the warrior and when to be the healer. Krell listened and wondered if the Corvani Empire could learn the same lessons. But he doubted it. The Empire was too old, too set in its ways. They saw conquest as natural, inevitable. They wouldn't change until something forced them to change. Maybe humanity would be that force. Maybe Earth's victory was the beginning of something bigger, a shift in galactic power. The old empires would have to adapt or fall. And the new species, the ones just reaching the stars, would have a choice: follow humanity's example or follow the old ways. Time would tell which path the galaxy chose. 3 weeks after the battle at Valara Prime, Ambassador Helen Carter stood in front of the Galactic Council again. But this time, the huge chamber was completely silent. Nobody was shouting. Nobody was arguing. All 300 representatives from different species were simply watching and listening. The holographic displays showed what had happened after Earth intervened. Valara Prime was free from the Kryn. Nearly 8 million Valari had survived, and they were rebuilding their world with help from human engineers and workers. The Kryn, Dominion had pulled back from 17 conquered worlds. Their military power was broken. Their fleet was destroyed. The entire galaxy had watched everything happen in real time. News services from 1,000 worlds broadcast the battle. Everyone saw what happened when humans went to war for their friends. Council Director Javik glowed a soft orange color. Orange meant respect in his species. He spoke to Helen, and his voice was different from before. It was not angry or demanding. It was careful and respectful. Javik said the Council wanted to formally acknowledge Earth's actions. He admitted their methods were aggressive, but the results could not be denied. Humans had saved millions of lives. They had stopped a threat that the Council had been too afraid to confront. Helen nodded politely. Her face showed no emotion. She had not forgotten how the Council did nothing when it mattered most. She said Earth did what needed to be done. She added that the Council should have done it years ago. Representative Threll of the Mantis Union stepped forward. The large insect-like alien clicked his mandibles. It was a sound of thoughtful respect. Threll was a warrior, and warriors understood what had happened here better than most. Threll admitted he had doubted Earth. He thought humans would be destroyed. Instead, humans had won a military victory, so complete that it changed the balance of power in the entire sector. The Kryn had feared nothing. Now they feared Earth. Now everyone feared Earth. Helen smiled slightly. It was true. Military analysts from every civilization had studied the battle data. The speed of the human attack shocked everyone. The precision shocked them. The sheer violence shocked them. Species that thought they understood warfare realized they knew nothing about how humans fought. But more than the how, it was the why that changed everything. Humanity had not gone to war for resources. They did not want territory. They did not want political power. They went to war because their friends were dying and nobody else would help. This terrified the aggressive empires. It inspired the peaceful civilizations. It made humanity something completely new in galactic politics. Humans were a power that could not be ignored. More importantly, they could not be predicted using normal ideas about cost and benefit. Humans did not always do what was profitable or safe. Sometimes they just did what was right. Helen activated another display. It showed thousands of messages that had flooded Earth's communication networks since the battle. Dozens of species were requesting defensive treaties. Hundreds wanted trade agreements. Every single one was treating humanity with a respect that had been completely absent just weeks before. Helen spoke carefully. She said the Terran Federation was prepared to discuss formal alliances with other species. But everyone needed to understand something important. Earth would not be soldiers for hire. Humans would not ignore crimes against innocent people just because it was politically convenient. And humans would never abandon their friends. She looked around the chamber at all the assembled representatives. She wanted them to really understand what she was saying. If you want Earth as an ally, you need to know what that means. It means when you call for help, humans will come. It means humans expect the same from you. That is what friends do for each other. On Valara Prime, Captain Jake Morrison walked through the capital city with Ambassador Vela. Vela was a Valari diplomat. She was small and delicate compared to Jake, with large expressive eyes and soft fur covering her body. She looked fragile, but Jake had learned that the Valari were stronger than they appeared. They had survived something that would have destroyed many other species. The city still showed damage from the battle. Buildings had burn marks on them. Some streets had holes from explosions. But life was coming back. Valari children were playing in parks that had been battlefields just days ago. Shops were opening again. People were laughing and talking. Hope had returned to this world. Vela's large eyes were wet with tears. Her voice shook as she spoke. She said her people thought they would die. The council did nothing. Their neighbors did nothing. The Valari sent their distress signal believing it would be their last message to the galaxy. Jake put a gentle hand on her shoulder. He was careful to be soft. He knew his strength could hurt her if he was not careful. He told her that the Valari called for help, and humans answered. That is what friends do. Vela looked up at him. She asked why. Why would humans risk so much? Earth lost ships in the battle. Human soldiers died. The galaxy condemned Earth for starting a war. Why would humans sacrifice so much for the Valari? Jake was quiet for a moment. He thought about the Marines who did not come home. He thought about the pilots who died protecting Valari cities. He thought about the sailors who gave their lives to save a species that most humans had never even met. He spoke slowly, choosing his words carefully. He told Vela it was because the Valari trusted humans when others feared them. Because the Valari showed kindness when the galaxy called humans monsters. Because in this cold, dark universe, friendship is the only thing that really matters. He looked up at the sky. Human ships were still in orbit, protecting the planet. They would stay until the Valari felt safe again. Jake told Vela that Earth has an old saying. We remember our friends and we never forget our enemies. The Kryn will remember what happened here. The Council will remember. Every species in the galaxy will remember. He smiled. It was a genuine, warm smile this time, not the predator's smile from before the battle. Jake continued. He said that other species called humans Deathworlders. They called humans monsters. They said humans were too violent, too aggressive, too dangerous to be trusted. But when innocent people were dying and nobody else would help, it was the monsters who came to save the day. Vela nodded slowly. Understanding showed in her eyes. She spoke softly. She said humans were not monsters. Humans were heroes. Jake shook his head gently. He disagreed. He said humans were not monsters and they were not heroes. They were just humans. And sometimes that was enough. Far away in deep space, the broken remains of the Kryn fleet limped toward home. War Master Krell sat in a prison cell on a human ship, waiting for his trial. Across the galaxy, powerful empires that thought they were invincible began changing their plans. They started calculating new strategies that took Earth into account, because the Deathworlders had spoken. They showed the galaxy what humanity truly was. Not monsters, not heroes. Just friends who would cross the stars to help people in need. And in a universe where most species only cared about profit and power, that made humans the most dangerous species of all. Because you could not predict them, you could not buy them, you could not scare them into abandoning the people they cared about. The galaxy had learned its lesson. Some learned it with gratitude, some learned it with fear, but everyone learned the same basic truth. If you become friends with humanity, they will protect you no matter what. If you hurt friends of humanity, they will come for you with unstoppable fury. There was no middle ground. You were either with them or against them. And everyone in the galaxy now understood which side they wanted to be on. 6 months had passed since the Battle of Valara Prime. The galaxy was a different place now. Everyone knew about humanity. Everyone had heard the stories. Some of those stories were true. Some were exaggerated. But all of them carried the same basic message. Do not anger the humans. Do not hurt their friends. On Earth, Admiral Kate Sullivan sat in her office at Naval Command. The room had large windows that looked out at the blue planet below. She was reading reports from across human space. The reports told an interesting story about how the galaxy was changing. 17 species had signed defensive pacts with Earth. That meant if anyone attacked them, humans would help defend them. In return, those species promised to help Earth if needed. These were real alliances based on mutual respect and trust. But there was something more interesting in the reports. Crimes across several sectors of space had dropped dramatically. Piracy was down by 60%. Slave trading had almost stopped completely. Aggressive empires were pulling back from border disputes and settling things peacefully. Why? Because nobody wanted to be the next Kryn Dominion. Nobody wanted to be the next example of what happened when you crossed humanity. The mere existence of Earth as a military power was making the galaxy a more peaceful place. That was something Kate never expected. Her assistant, Commander Steve Dalton, entered with more news. He looked excited. Steve said they had received word that the Valari were holding a ceremony in 1 week. They wanted to honor the humans who saved their world. They were inviting Captain Morrison, Admiral Sullivan, and the families of every human who died in the battle. Kate nodded. She would definitely attend. Those families deserved to see what their loved ones had died for. They deserved to meet the people who were alive because of human sacrifice. On Valara Prime, preparations for the ceremony were well underway. The Valari had built a memorial in the center of their capital city. It was a beautiful structure made of crystal that caught the sunlight and threw rainbows across the square. On the crystal were carved the names of every human who died saving Valara Prime. 243 names. 243 lives given for friends. Ambassador Vela supervised the preparations personally. She wanted everything to be perfect. The humans had given everything for her people. The least the Valari could do was honor that sacrifice properly. Jake Morrison arrived 3 days before the ceremony. He wanted time to walk through the city and see how much had changed. The damage from the battle was mostly repaired now. New buildings stood where old ones had been destroyed. But the Valari had made sure to preserve some of the battle sites as reminders of what happened. In one park, there was a crater from where a Kryn artillery shell had hit. The Valari filled it with water and turned it into a reflecting pool. Around the pool, they planted trees in memory of everyone who died in the war, human names and Valari names together. Jake stood by the pool for a long time. He thought about Sergeant Nicole Adams, who died holding a position against Kryn armor so civilians could evacuate. He thought about Lieutenant Greg Patterson, who stayed at his post on a burning ship to keep communications running until everyone else could escape. He thought about all the others who gave their lives that day. Vela found him there. She walked up quietly and stood beside him, looking at the memorial trees. She did not speak at first. She just stood there with him in silence. Sometimes silence was better than words. Finally, Vela spoke. She asked Jake if humans regretted what they did. She asked if Earth regretted going to war for the Valari. The question surprised Jake. He turned to look at her with confusion. He asked why she would think that. She looked down at her hands. She said that many species in the galaxy were saying Earth made a mistake. They said humans lost ships and lives for people they barely knew. They said it was foolish to risk so much for such a small gain. Some were calling Earth reckless and dangerous. Jake laughed. It was not a mean laugh. It was the laugh of someone who found something genuinely amusing. He told Vela that humans did not measure friendship by profit and loss. They did not calculate the value of loyalty in ships and credits. That was not how friendship worked. He explained that every human who went to Valara Prime knew the risks. They knew some of them would not come home. But they went anyway because it was the right thing to do, because the Valari were friends, because when friends need help, you help them. It was that simple. Vela's eyes filled with tears again. She had cried many times over the past months. Happy tears, sad tears, grateful tears. She told Jake that the Valari would never forget what Earth did. They would tell their children. Their children would tell their children. For as long as the Valari existed, they would remember the day the humans came. The day of the ceremony arrived. Thousands of Valari filled the square around the Crystal Memorial. Human families who had lost loved ones stood in places of honor. Admiral Sullivan and Captain Morrison stood at the front with Ambassador Helen Carter and other Earth representatives. Vela spoke first. She addressed the crowd in both Valari and human languages. She told the story of what happened. She told how the Kryn came and everyone thought the Valari would be destroyed. She told how they sent one desperate message for help, not really believing anyone would answer. But Earth answered. The humans came with fury and determination. They fought a battle they should have lost and won it anyway. They saved 8 million Valari lives and asked for nothing in return. Vela turned to face the humans. She spoke directly to them now. She said that the Valari had no way to truly repay this debt. There was no amount of money or resources that could match what Earth had done. But the Valari could promise one thing. From this day forward, humanity would always have a friend in the Valari. Always. The crowd of Valari erupted in cheers. It was a sound of pure gratitude and joy. The humans in the square found themselves surrounded by Valari families who wanted to shake their hands, hug them, thank them personally. Jake found himself talking to a young Valari girl. She could not have been more than 10 years old in human terms. She looked up at him with big, curious eyes. She asked if it was true that humans came from a scary planet where everything tried to kill you. Jake smiled and knelt down to her level. He admitted it was sort of true. Earth was more dangerous than most planets. But that danger made humans strong. It taught them to protect each other. It taught them to value friendship because survival was easier with friends. The girl thought about this. Then she said she was glad humans were strong. She said her family would have died if the humans had not come. Her mother, her father, her little brother, all of them would be gone. She wanted Jake to know that she would never forget what Earth did. Jake felt his throat tighten with emotion. This was why humans fought. Not for glory or profit, for moments like this, for children who would grow up safe because humans kept their promises. Later that night, the human delegation gathered on the Valkyrie's Fury. The ship was still in orbit, part of the protection force that would remain until the Valari rebuilt their own defenses. Jake stood on the observation deck with Admiral Sullivan and looked down at Valara Prime. Kate spoke quietly. She said she had been thinking about what this all meant. Earth had accidentally become the unofficial protector of the peaceful species in the galaxy. That was a big responsibility. It meant more wars might come. More humans might die. Jake nodded. He knew she was right. But he also knew something else. He said that humanity would never stop being who they were. They would never start calculating friendship in profit and loss. They would never abandon people who needed help. Maybe that made humans dangerous. Maybe it made them unpredictable. But it also made them something the galaxy desperately needed. It made them reliable. If you became friends with Earth, you knew humans would stand by you no matter what. Kate smiled. She agreed. She said that Earth did not set out to become the heroes of the galaxy. They just did what felt right. And somehow that was enough. Down on Valara Prime, the ceremony had ended, but the celebration continued. Valari families danced in the streets. Music filled the air. Children played games in parks that had been battlefields. Life had returned to this world, and in orbit above, human ships kept watch. Silent guardians protecting friends who had trusted them when others feared them. The Deathworlders standing watch over those who could not protect themselves. The galaxy had learned its lesson. Friendship with humanity meant something real. It meant protection. It meant loyalty. It meant that no matter how dark things got, no matter how hopeless things seemed, if you called for help, the humans would answer. And that promise, that simple commitment to stand by their friends, made humanity the most powerful force in the galaxy, not because of their weapons or their ships, but because of their hearts.